Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Robertson. I'm Chief Executive of the Big Issue Foundation. Just a little bit of context about me, my sort of journey here, which wasn't my walk from London Bridge, but I've been at the Big Issue Foundation for 10 years. Prior to that, I was at Shelter for 13 years, running all the businesses that were generating money for Shelter that weren't fundraising. So it's a national chain of charity shops, Shelter Trading, an internet mail order Christmas card business, and Shelter Training that sells housing and housing-related skills to the wider public to promote the words of Shelter. Before that, I was at Marie Curie for a year, running their stores in the south of England. You can tell I'm kind of old here. And for those people who are old enough to remember, I started out my life working with people in... Do you remember, anyone remember Our Price Records? Yes. So I started out in music retail. So I've always worked with people. The best thing about working at Our Price was the amount of people that would come in and, having heard the title of a record slightly wrongly on the radio, and ask for it. My all-time two favourites, genuine stories. Somebody did come in and say, "Excuse me, mate, have you got that one Central Heating by Marvin Gaye?" And it's like, when I get that feeling, no, I don't want to think about that. And the other one, which is also true, was somebody came in looking really upset, saying, "Have you got that one Free Nelson the Panda?" And we're like, "I think you mean Mandela." And they went, no, it's a panda. He's been in captivity 21 years. People are so blind. Anyway, working with people, it's always an amazing thing. So you'll all be familiar, I'm sure, with The Big Issue magazine, and this is this week's copy, but perhaps not the story of its sort of genesis. So just to contextualize it for you a bit, about 28 years or so ago, Gordon Roddick, founder of The Body Shop, was in New York on business, and he was struck by the sheer number and visibility of homeless people on the streets asking for cash. You know, "Buddy, can you spare a dime?" And a guy came up to him and he sold him something called street news. So rather than somebody just asking for money, Gordon realized he was entering into a commercial transaction. He paid for a paper, he had something to read, and that individual profited by return. When he came back to the UK, he was friends with and knew our founder, John Bird, now Lord John Bird of Notting Hill, no less, who at that time was a printer. But they went back a very, very long time. In fact, they met in a pub in Edinburgh when John Bird was on the run from the London police and hiding out in Scotland for crimes and misdemeanors. So a kind of an unusual meeting, as it were. Now, John had grown up in what we all might sort of understand as a typical kind of poverty-stricken home. He left that home without being able to read or write. Drugs, alcohol, prison. In fact, it was in prison where he learned to read and write. A general ne'er-do-well, and not the kind of person that anyone in their right mind necessarily might invest £500,000 into setting up the Big Issue organisation. But that's exactly what Gordon and Nita Roddick did. And, you know, bravely, or naively, you might say, the Big Issue magazine was born. Now, it's always operated on the same basis. That basis is that the content is written by professional journalists. The circulation forms the basis of the rate card, and advertising is sold through Dennis Publishing, who do The Week and Viz and various other publications you'd be aware of. And the average circulation of the magazine is about 88,000 copies a week. But that's not what's sold to us, collectively the general public. The magazine has always been sold exclusively to people experiencing poverty, to experiencing social and financial exclusion, and in real simple terms. If you run out of money and you run out of friends, you're more likely to be spending time outside than the average person, so frequently associated with homelessness. That average circulation has a seasonal peak, just like any kind of retail business. In the week before Christmas last year, 315,000 copies was sold on to Big Issue vendors who in turn went out to sell them on the streets of our country. So a huge enterprise, and set up in essence to give people an alternative to crime, an alternative to begging, an alternative to prostitution, and any other way you might go about getting money when you run out of it. So very much set up as an opportunity to give people experiencing homelessness the opportunity to take control of their lives and become technically, which is what a newsagent is, a Big Issue vendor is, a newsagent without a shop. And we use the phrase a hand up and not a hand out. So just to give you a sort of sense of how that absolutely works, if you're a new Big Issue vendor to us, you'll be referred to us by other vendors, through the police, through day centres, all sorts of ways that you might be coming to us. But typically, and I'm being very simplistic here, your personal time horizon will be about 60 to 90 minutes ahead. It'll be about, what do I do next? What am I going to eat? How do I get out of the rain? Where am I going to sleep? Whatever's going on, you're stuck in the immediacy of the situation that you're in, and you're not thinking about tomorrow. Now, you get 5 free copies of the Big Issue magazine when you join, and within the space of an hour, you've been allocated a training pitch, and you have to turn those 48 pages back into cash. £2.50 is the price. So you've got to do that, and you've got to save some of that, because the next time you come into the organisation, you need to have some cash of your own to invest in that product. Now, if you come back the next day and go, oh, I'm really sorry, mate, I haven't got any money, I've run out of it, it's all gone terribly wrong, have some more free magazines? The answer is no. So you have to take some responsibility for yourself in the very first instant. And when you come back through that door the next day with some cash that you've saved, no matter what else you might choose to have done with that, we have added another 23 hours onto someone's personal time horizon. You're thinking about tomorrow. And so that opportunity to engage with the public and to engage with your own inner entrepreneur gives you the chance to start to trade. Now, when people come to us, they might have lots of things going on in their lives. You might have a difficult tenancy situation, your landlord's being unpleasant, whatever those things are. But people walk through the door for one reason and one reason only, and that is to get cash. So if you just imagine that you've come in desperate situation, maybe you've lost all the things that are most important to you in your life, your sense of self, your home, your friends, anything that you can rely on. Most of us want to crawl away and die in some form or another. You don't think, oh, I'm going to become a newsagent without a shop. But people come, and that's what they want to do. So money is the real important driver for them. And when you get out on the street and you put on one of our tabars, the red jackets you'll all be familiar with, and you hold up this, which I point out technically is a piece of A4 paper. It's not that scary, it's not a gun, it's not a knife, any of those things. Suddenly you're not a newsagent without a shop. You're a visibly identifiable member of the homeless community. The drunk, the idle, the feckless, the drug addicted, and generally worthy of people's disdain. So you have got to get people to trade with you. You have to start to engage with them. If you just sort of stand there like this, you're probably not going to sell your copies of the magazine. So you've got to say, excuse me, sir, excuse me, madam, copy of the Big Issue. Can I talk to you? You've got to start to talk to people, but they don't necessarily want to talk to you. Now, it's not uncommon for people to come up to our vendors who no one's spoken to them for about 2.5 hours, and somebody says, get a job, mate. Now, if you imagine you're in your office and 2.5 hours, everyone's been ignoring you, and somebody comes in and goes, get a job, you'd be a bit like, this is really obvious, I'm at work and you're kind of late. So you've got to start to engage with people. And that is really what starts to change people. So money is the driver that brings people through the door, but actually resilience and engaging with the public, your customers begin to change you, because that £2.50 that you get from that first sale that you've got in the morning is a huge, huge boost. It could be almost £2,500. The value in trading in that space is very, very, very important. It gives people the confidence to realise that actually they can do something as an alternative. They can do something that's going to mean something to them, and they can start to engage with the public. No matter how tough that can be, that process of validation is absolutely critical. Now, just to give you a sort of sense of the scale, there's about 1,400 or so active vendors across the UK. Within the Big Issue magazine, the asset-locked social enterprise that produces the magazine and gets it to market. In other words, when I say asset-locked, it means the money that's made goes back into making more copies of the magazine. There's about 75 people. And within the Big Issue Foundation, the charity, the service arm that I'm chief exec of, there's about 25 of us. So there's 100 people in the Big Issue compared to 1,400 people. So this audience is about half the size of the whole organisation. And we're unique in that we're defined by the people that are doing the job of work at the moment. I would imagine that every single person in this room has seen a Big Issue vendor. And I hope some of you have actually bought copies of the magazine or will go on to do so afterwards. We are defined by that process of putting the person, the beneficiary, in front of the public first. This is the first time for many that you'll have met me or heard me speak, but you'll have understood what Big Issue vendors are doing across the country, or not, but you will have seen them for many a year. So we're really, really small in comparison to the imprint and the footprint that we have out there. Now, our job within the Big Issue Foundation is to deal with the issues that might have brought you to us in the first place or have arisen as a result of your experiences of homelessness. So the logic goes, okay then, so there's 25 people in the charity, you turn over about £1 million. How on earth can you help all these people? Well, the answer is we help about half at the moment. We need to be about 2 times the size we are, £2 million. We'll make our operation offer a consistency of service across the UK. So that's our stated ambition. But when I started, we had to change the way we were working because we were a very traditional organisation. We used to have things like a JET team, Jobs, Education and Training. We had an IT training suite in Birmingham, which funders loved. You could go in and see a whole bunch of homeless dudes like Googling their names and waving, and funders thought, this is brilliant. Our problem was we were massively duplicating the work of other organisations. We had a degree of arrogance that we should have the same services as other homeless organisations, because that's what we thought we were. And we weren't really very flexible in terms of how we were offering those services. So the first thing we did was try to get back to our sort of fundamental basis of what is it that we really do? How is it that we really connect? And the end result of that was we stopped providing those services, which sounds counterintuitive. It doesn't sound like the right way of offering services. Now, if anybody had the misfortune of being homeless tonight on the streets of our country and was picked up by any other homeless organisation, your status would be that of a client. You would be the recipient of whatever it is that organisation chose to do for you. Big issue vendors are independent of us. They come to us from their own commercial choice. In the same way as you might go to one coffee shop store compared to another, you're exercising your own economic choice. So first and foremost, when we thought about it, we realised that big issue vendors aren't our clients, they're our customers, and they come to us from choice. So what we do now, rather than providing those services ourselves, is we broker between other agencies and other organisations that are better set up, better funded than we are, to deliver the solutions that are personal to each individual that we're working with. So rather than everyone getting together and learning how to do Excel or something, which might be useful, we know that the needs of each person are specific and person-centred to them. Therefore, we broker into those other organisations who are funded on the basis of contacting people who are chaotic and hard to reach. Well, big issue vendors aren't chaotic and hard to reach for us because there's a product that comes out every Monday that they choose to buy with their own cash. So therefore, in terms of realising that we were working with customers first rather than the homeless or the needy, we realised that we could start to build on that ethos of a hand up and not a hand out, and realise that when people start an economic journey, when they start trading on the streets of our country, they're also beginning a social journey, and the confidence they get from becoming successful tradespeople allows us to start to deal with some of the issues that might have brought them through the door in the first place. So it's a value exchange, and that was the kind of key thing for us to realise as an enabler and as connecting with the kind of entrepreneurial spirit of the people that we work with across the country. So that's how we deliver those services. But the real challenge that we have, the real issues that are out there for us, is being very small and actually not having very much money. We're a very familiar brand, but people don't really understand what we do or how it works. So we had to think carefully. People say, why don't you do these amazing marketing campaigns and put stuff out there on the BBC and in newspapers and everything, telling the world what actually the amazing work is happening on the street and how people are actually trading and not begging out there is a real change and a real difference. Well, the answer is simple. We don't have enough money. So we had to start to think about how are we going to do this. Now, I'd like to make this out to sound really strategic, but I'll be honest, this was an opportunity that happened that we didn't know what to do with. So we had a relationship with HSBC Retail Bank, and they said to us, we want to do a volunteering day. And I think, what on earth can we possibly do? Because lots of volunteering days are doing things like painting people's rooms and stuff, and lots of our vendors didn't have anywhere to live, so how are we going to deal with that? And we thought, anyway, it's such a good opportunity. We'll get the people out on the street, and we'll get them to meet our vendors, and maybe something good will happen. So off we go to Covent Garden with a whole bunch of really enthusiastic volunteers talking to us, going, what the hell are we going to do with all these people for a day? I don't know. And then they go, well, actually, we are retail bankers. Somebody can come into our bank and to get 50 quid, and I can sell them a mortgage. I can sell them an ISA. So what we want to do is work with your vendors so they get the benefit of the amazing sales training that we've had. So at the end of the day, they're financially better off than they were at the beginning. We thought, brilliant. Free training from bankers. Bit of a strange conversation around the side of Marks & Spencer's in Covent Garden. Who wants to work with a bunch of bankers, guys? And I go, well, it might be a laugh. I'm at work. It's nice to have a laugh at work. People don't really think about that. So fair enough. We gave all the HSBC guys the red jackets, and they held up this, which, of course, is technically, as I still point out, a piece of A4 paper. This is not the scariest thing like holding up a gun or holding up a knife at all. So out they all went, really enthusiastic in pairs, working with the vendors, held it up, and people started saying, get a job. And so people started ignoring them. It is actually technically possible, if you see a big issue vendor, to make a phone call on the reverse side of your mobile phone. You don't realise you could do that, but you just flip it over, start tapping it, hello mum, help again. People became incredibly fascinated with the double red lines of Covent Garden. They see a big issue vendor and they say, oh my God, those red lines are amazing. I've never seen anything like that before. And then off they go again. They received all sorts of negative responses to them, alongside actually selling some magazines. So a couple of guys took the vendor that they were working with into a sandwich bar in Covent Garden, and with their red tabards on, and the manager came over to them and said, sorry, we don't want people like you in here, but you're going to frighten the other customers off. Can you leave, please? They were flabbergasted by the degree of exclusion and the degree of... it's almost the ignorance that was presenting itself to them. They were really shocked. Now, at the end of the day, when we had the feedback session, the people in the room were absolutely gobsmacked by what had happened to them. They had realised that actually some of the behaviours, some of the responses that they received from actually just trying to sell a piece of A4 paper with 47 other good pages behind it to the general public, that the behaviours that had been displayed to them were some of the values and the behaviours that they themselves, as subconsciously, at some level or another, realised they held themselves. And it was hugely emotional, and it was hugely a turning point for them. And that was really what launched our whole kind of vendor day experience, which sits very much in the lived experience space of learning and development. We found that by taking people out to work with our vendors, it suddenly changed their perspective of everything. And what's more, they couldn't stop telling other people. We hit this rich marketing stream because everybody was like, oh God, you will not believe what happened. I'm very proud to say that I do know for sure that that experience has been behind some people having drunken arguments with other friends on a Friday night when somebody says, you know the homeless, they're really lazy, they're really scary. And somebody goes, no, they're not. They're big issue vendors. I need to get a quick glass of water. Keep filming. That's better. So there we were, suddenly in this kind of space. Since then, it's gone on to become a mainstream source of training and development for people in organisations. It seems like banks and law firms have a particular appetite for this kind of abuse for their staff. I don't know why, but that's what it is. At Freshfields, the law firm down at Blackfriars, it's day 3 of their inductions. So imagine you're a new lawyer. So the first day you kind of get to meet the partners upstairs and you eat a swan or whatever it is that rich lawyers do. I don't know, I haven't been to that lunch, but I'm sure that's the kind of thing that happens. Next day you sign all the IT policies agreeing that you're not going to leak important information, and day 3 you're out selling the big issue. And people are like, what the hell? Now actually what that really does mean is that for organisations like Freshfields and many others, they're taking their mission and their social purpose and what they saw as CR really, really seriously, because there is nothing as strange as not being the person you know yourself to be, but being who other people think you are. So if you're a lawyer and you've got to argue your case against another barrister, you've got all the kind of status of who you are and the organisation you work for. But actually, if that's all stripped away by something as simple as a piece of red plastic jacket and a piece of A4 paper, suddenly it really makes people think again. And that message goes out there and keeps going out. Last week, we had the top 12 Clark's Shoes store managers who are out working with our vendors in Liverpool Street, tasked with going back into Clark's and talking to all the other staff about what they'd learned from that. That meant for us that our mission and our purpose and the idea of trying to kind of hook things together and change how people think and feel translated into a lived experience that wasn't CSR, it was participative learning and development for salespeople, for people that are trying to connect with people in their work, and realising that actually society itself is a little bit different than they really thought it was in the first place. More valuable than any marketing campaign we could possibly do. So a huge, huge step forward for us. Now, something else that's really kind of interesting in that sort of space for us is that the big issue itself is a media owner. It is not like Shelter, where I worked for many years, which is a great organisation, and will have things like a spring campaign and an autumn campaign. We have a new product that comes out every Monday. Last week it was the Lego movie. This week it's a nice theme around Valentine's Day. We can play in that space that other organisations can't. So we kind of breathed out and started to relax and say, okay, we know we deal with serious things. We see, hear and smell things you wouldn't necessarily want to encounter in all your life. But actually, as you can see with these guys working with our vendors out on the street, the sense of connection and the sense of community that comes out of that was something that was a lifelong lived experience and personal process of change that meant that people became advocates for us and started to help us as a small organisation connect with bigger organisations who were discovering their own social purpose and their own sense of mission in their teams. For the really smart ones out there, they were measuring their engagement levels before and after the experiences in the vendor days, and they were getting record returns in terms of how people felt, not only about the organization, but about the fact that the organization was creating space for them to learn and think in this way in the modern society. So it was a huge bit of value exchange for us and networking that we never really kind of understood strategically and were set out to do. We just sort of ended up there. And the reason why we ended up there was that we engaged with our customers, because that was the most critical thing for us. Rather than sitting around thinking, what's the best thing we could possibly do on behalf of other big issue vendors, forget that. Actually put people together with what they really understand is what really seems to work. And that for us has actually had a huge kind of bit of learning kind of culture for us. When it was the Olympics, for example, we were thinking we need to have some really kind of amazing homeless stories kind of in the big issue, something to do with in and around kind of homelessness in the Olympics. Now, it turns out that one of our vendors, who have been one of the trailblazers in what we have now, which is a vendor placement scheme where people go and work in large corporates for 1 day a week, selling their magazines and then getting some bespoke training and support, might be IT, it might be all sorts of things. Big organizations have HR departments and lots of other experiential opportunities. Joel Hodgson had been gainfully employed in the organisation that he got placed in and had no longer been a big issue vendor. Turns out that organisation as well was the lead law firm behind the Olympics. And they got an opportunity with a staff vote to vote for Joel to carry the Olympic torch. So I'm thinking, like, this is brilliant. We've got a former big issue vendor, good-looking young guy, running in a tracksuit, carrying the Olympic torch. We are absolutely made. So I phoned up Paul McNamee, the editor, said, this is it, we've got the story, it's absolutely, we nailed it, this is completely in the spirit of the Olympics. And Paul's words were, I'm not sure it's newsworthy enough. And I was like, what? You know, what are we going to do? Get all of London's homeless together and get them to levitate like 6 inches off the ground and put a copy of the magazine underneath their feet? It's like, this is a good enough good news story. He's like, no, it's not newsworthy enough. I was out on the streets complaining to one of our vendors, Andre, just about this thing. He said, it's ridiculous. Everybody wants to get hold of Danny Boyle. That's what the organisation decided. Let's get rid of Danny Boyle. Get rid of Danny Boyle? No, let's get in touch with Danny Boyle. Now, you can imagine that Danny was quite busy organising the Olympic opening ceremony. He wasn't picking up his phone that often. You know, he's been working all day and night, so nobody could get in touch with him. All the important people couldn't get in touch with him. And so I ranted to Andre, and Andre says, I've got Danny Boyle's phone number. And I'm like, yeah, of course you have, Andre, anyway. This is ridiculous. And no, I've got Andre's phone number. And it turns out Andre did have Danny Boyle's phone number because Andre was in the Olympic opening ceremony playing the steel pan bands with Notting Hill Steel Pan Band. So that's how he'd done it. He got to meet him, and that's how he, in the end, got in contact with Danny Boyle. And the message there is really straightforward and simple. You need to talk to your staff because your staff probably know more than you do. And all the most important people in organisations who set out all these grand things, if you're not talking to people, you're not going to find out what the real opportunities are out there. And that took something away for us that was really quite a really important way for us to learn. Because our vendors meet all sorts of people. One of our vendors at St Paul's Cathedral, his absolute hero is the Dalai Lama. Guess who he met when he was selling the big issue? The Dalai Lama. So people interact with vendors in all these sorts of ways, and we realised that we had this kind of inward-looking idea that at the top we were the most important people, and we were really the absolute cleverest, and we could make things happen because we've got these big brands, and all these things are going to happen. They wouldn't happen at all, but it's happening all the time around us with our vendors. So talking to your customers is really, really critical. Now, it's the 1860s Peddlers Act that means you could all leave this wonderful room and go and stand on the streets outside and sell a copy of the Big Issue magazine. You do not need a street trader's license. You need it for anything else that you might be selling. People phone up, go, rains all the time. Why don't you guys do the big brolly? Simple answer is you would need a street trader's license. So curiously, by this old bit of legislation, this kind of accidental journalistic journey of change started and is still going on today. And it's why you don't see vendors on private land, because you need the landlord's permission. And so you have to try and get people to change their minds and allow people into the private land that they've got. And the way that we've been able to do that, for sure, where we have managed to change it, of course, is to replicate our vendor day experiences with some of those organisations. Oh, then actually this is not that scary, having a homeless person working outside our law firm on a private piece of land. They're not going to bite the general public or leap up and do something absolutely crazy. They're actually selling a product. So one thing I would ask you all to remember, for sure, when you see a big issue vendor, is to realise that they're at work, they've got up, they've invested their own money and something of themselves in the product that they're seeking to change. And it's through your interaction with people, with big issue vendors, that you give them the confidence in their business, but also the confidence to address some of the issues that brought them to us in the first place. So in terms of activism, one of the things that you can all do, and people say to me, what is it that we can do? I see homelessness all over the place, and it's really disturbing. It upsets me. There were new rough sleeping statistics that came out just about 7 or 8 days ago that said, from the year previous, on the average night in the UK, 4,700 people slept rough on the streets of our country. And there was a good news story because there were 74 people less just now, about a week ago. But that is over 110% higher than when the first count was done in 2010. So it tells you the scale and the challenge that we've got on our hands. And the bit of work that big issue vendors are doing, which is in fact the toughest face-to-face sales job in the land, is trying to take some control of their destiny and turn some of the opportunities that are out there into meaningful work-based opportunities of life change. So when you see a vendor, do please remember the person that you're connecting with would actually, even if you don't want to copy the magazine, would like you to acknowledge that they're at work, to say hello, to stop and have a chat. Because it's actually quite hard to have a chat on the streets nowadays. People go all in their phones, they're tweeting, I hope you're tweeting now. It's at TBIF, by the way, because somebody back at the office will pick that up and spread that word. But people literally are working as hard as they can to change their lives in the face of adversity at the moment. So please do remember the value of your own social interaction with vendors. You might not be Danny Boyle or the Dalai Lama, but actually in terms of recognising the value of your own contribution, that everyday little bit of activism is a really important thing that you can do. And hopefully, for £2.50, which is cheaper than the price of some sparkling water in the City of London at least, you'll get a bloody good thing to read afterwards in return. And if you do see a vendor, and you do buy a magazine, please do take it, because the advertising is based on that circulation, that average of 88,000 or so copies a week. But people keep buying and selling the same magazine, it doesn't work. The circulation goes down, the rate card goes down, and so the social enterprise business begins to struggle. So if you see it and you pay for it, please take it. You don't go into Waitrose and get 70 quid's worth of food, get to the till and go, you guys are fantastic. Keep the money and put the food back. Take it, please. It's really, really important. The last thing I'll say is that on some of your seats here, we've left flyers for our big night walk, which is coming up on Friday, the 8th of March. Now, all of our events and everything we do are based on the identification that people have with the organisation, with big issue vendors. And this is a fundraising event. It's a 13-mile circular walk around the streets of London at night with our customers. And please have a look at opportunities like that, and I would urge you to join us. I've done them all, they are fantastic, and they're really important for our vendors, because not only is it a fundraiser that helps provide the services that we generate across the country, but also it's a point of contact for vendors with the public en masse. And there is nothing as good as realising that actually quite a lot of people are on your side. So our night walk has a very serious fundraising message, but underneath that 4,700 or so rough sleeper count that I was quoting earlier is based on something very simple. That is 2 people going out on one night of the year looking for people who are bedded down, i.e. looking like they're getting ready to go to bed on the streets. A lot of people who do sleep on the streets don't sleep on the main bit of the street. They sleep in alleyways, they sleep in parks, they sleep for health and safety reasons out of public sight. So they're ignored. When you go back with the people you've seen, you give that list to 2 other people who then go out a few hours later to verify the people you've seen. If more people have joined them, you don't count them. If someone's got up to go to the loo, they don't get counted. So it's a very small representation of the actual people that are sleeping on our streets. But the most important thing in our lived experience of new big issue vendors is that when they come to us, most of them are walking at night and sleeping in the day, because it is safer to sleep in the day than it is to sleep on the streets at night. So the scale of the problem, it's not a homelessness problem, it's a humanitarian problem of enormous proportion. And actually buying a copy of The Big Issue every week, taking part in our night walk, engaging your firm in the process of our vendor days, putting people in touch with the real core spirits and the things that disturb them, because people are upset by what they see, gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of mission. And that activism is something you can do in your lunchtime. It's something you can back up on social media. It's something you can do in a learning and development day. But it gives people something back, and it gives people the idea that if all of us do little things, it adds up to a lot. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me speak. I'm going to hang around at lunchtime. I'm happy to answer any questions when I'm hanging around, but can I just say I'm really rubbish at general knowledge, so can we keep it specific to the big issue and homelessness, not what's the capital, whatever, I haven't got a clue. But thank you for listening.